Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm looking at the 2026 governor's map and I'm going through an interesting scenario that I feel like doesn't get talked about too much. And this is the prospect of, can the Democrats actually gain governor seats in the 2026 elections? Now, governor's elections usually aren't talked about in the same way that Senate or House elections are, where they're obviously national federal elections for House and Senate. And so parties holding a majority matters a lot more in terms of the overall party dominance for national politics like Senate and House, where governor elections usually more focused on the individual state and the parties in that state trying to win. But I want to go through this scenario and talk about, could the Democrats actually gain some governor seats in 2026? And if they could, what would their ceiling essentially be? So right now in my most recent election prediction, I had the Republicans favored to win 16 governor's races, Democrats favored in 14, and currently 6 rated as toss-up or no rating at this time. But in this scenario, I'm going to go through what I could see as sort of being the Democrats' best case scenario or best realistic scenario for 2026. So first I'm going to start with the state of Nevada. Now, Nevada's Republican incumbent Governor Joe Lombardo, he's up for re-election in 2026. I think it's going to be a very close race. If you ask me today, I would say the governor's favored to win re-election by a little bit over 1.5% to 2% at this time. But Nevada's been a very competitive toss-up state in recent presidential years. The Senate race was very close in 2024. I think at very least, I wouldn't be shocked to see Nevada flip to the Democrats. This would be one net Democratic flip from 2024 to 2026, or 2022 to 2026 rather. Now we have the state of Arizona, currently held by Democrat Katie Hobbs. She'll be facing off against either Republican Andy Biggs or Karen Taylor Robson after some very close elections in 2022. We saw Katie Hobbs barely win against Carrie Lake by 0.67%. And just to show you, by the way, Joe Lombardo won by 1.5% in 2022. Could Katie Hobbs hold on in 2026 and win here? Well, I think that's certainly a possibility, and it would not really shock me if 2026 ends up being a great night for the Democrats if Hobbs were able to win there. The next state we have is the state of Wisconsin, where Democratic incumbent Tony Evers is not running for re-election. It will be an open race with a wide open Democratic and Republican primary to see who the next governor nominees for the state are going to be. Wisconsin, at the presidential level, just voted for Donald Trump very narrowly in 2024. Governor Evers won re-election by 3.4% in 2022 after he ousted Republican incumbent Governor Scott Walker by 1.1%. In this Democrat sort of best case scenario for the governor's map, it would be the Democrats holding on to Wisconsin in the lean Democratic category. Now we have the state of Michigan, where the Democrats, the governor Gretchen Whitmer is term limited and cannot run for a third consecutive term. This race is currently wide open right now as well, with Democrat Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State, currently favored to be the Democratic nominee against Republican John James, and Democratic Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan is running as an independent. So that race is very interesting, as there's going to be a large third-party amount of vote there. Michigan, we've seen be very close in recent years at the presidential level. President Trump won the state in 2024 at the presidential level, but the governor's race, Gretchen Whitmer won by 10.5% in 2022. Now, with the vote splitting and lack of incumbency, I don't think that will happen, but I certainly could see the Democrats winning Michigan in a lean Democratic margin. That gets the Democrats up to 18, Republicans 16. And at this current point in time, all 4 of the races I've gone over, as I mentioned, I currently have in the battleground category. So seeing Democrats winning all 4 of these races at this point would not really be too much of a shock. Next, we have the state of Georgia. Georgia, where this is Republican Governor Brian Kemp, he's term limited. He cannot seek another term. So this race is wide open on the Republican and Democratic sides. Right now, I currently think it'll be Chris Carr for the Republicans. And the current candidates in the race, Democrat Keisha Lance Bottoms, I think starts out as the Democratic leader. But if Stacey Abrams were to run again, it's possible she would win the Democratic primary. Georgia's been very close. In 2022, Kemp won by 7.5% after he only won by 1.4% in 2018. But of course, in the presidential race, we saw in 2020, Joe Biden narrowly won the state by 0.24%. And both Georgia senators currently are Democrats, and Democrat Raphael Warnock and Democrat John Ossoff. So could the Democrats actually be able to win the state of Georgia? They'd be very narrow, but could they do that where they win it by under 1 point, or maybe even by a lean margin a little bit over 1 point in 2026? Again, in a Democrat's sort of best case scenario where they're trying to gain seats, I think that is certainly possible. So just to clarify, the Democrats have picked up a win in Nevada. They've held Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Now they've flipped Georgia. That's currently 2 Democratic flips at this point in time. A third one could be in the state of Iowa, where Iowa, a large reason for this is that Republican Governor Kim Reynolds currently is not running for re-election, and despite winning by a safe margin back in 2022, currently has very poor approval ratings in a lot of polls that I have seen. And if she were to run again, she would have a very hard time at winning a re-election given how poor her approval ratings are. And that could give a boost to the only Democratic candidate statewide holding elected office and Democratic candidate for governor, Rob Sand, where this race is going to be very close. Right now, Representative Randy Feenstra is likely going to be the Republican nominee, facing off against Rob Sand. I think Democrats are more likely than not probably going to narrowly lose this race. I think the Republicans are favored to win. But what if Rob Sand is able to win this race in Iowa in a very close election, sort of a Democratic resurgence in the state? Again, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think at very least it's plausible. At this point, Democrats would have 3 holds and 3 Democratic gains. So that gets the Democrats up to 20 governor seats, Republicans currently at 16. And however, there are some more potential flips that I could realistically see maybe in a Democrat best case scenario. The first one would be the state of Kansas, where it's currently held by Democrat Governor Laura Kelly. Now, she is term limited and cannot run for re-election, and it's been relatively consensus ranking. The Democrats are going to lose the state of Kansas in the governor's race in 2026, as the lieutenant governor is not running, and the Democrats don't have really a top-tier candidate to try and keep the seat in Democratic hands. However, the Republican primary is wide open, and in the 2026, it should be a very strong night for the Democrats. Maybe the Democratic governor is doing so well in the state and is so well approved of, enough voters say they want to keep Democratic governorship, and Kansas narrowly stays blue once again. I think at this point, we're starting to get into it's more unrealistic than not will not happen situation, but at very least, it is conceivably possible. Now, what about the state of Texas? This is Republican Governor Greg Abbott. He's up for re-election, I believe, for a 5th term in the state of Texas. I think he's more likely to survive another election and win re-election. I don't think he's really be in any danger of losing. Maybe Democrats try and make Texas a potential target in that one. That could be a scenario. Ohio could be very interesting, where Republican Mike DeWine is term limited and cannot run again. Now, the Republican candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, the 2024 presidential candidate, is going to be the Republican nominee, and he could be facing off against a number of Democrats, whether it's Amy Acton or Tim Ryan or possibly former U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown. And in talking about this scenario, where it would be Vivek Ramaswamy versus Sherrod Brown, I think presents the Democrats the best opportunity at potentially flipping the state of Ohio from red to blue. Now, I personally don't think in my own predictions that Ohio is going to go blue. I think it would stay red. But could Sherrod Brown, if the Democrats had like an amazing night, narrowly defeat Vivek Ramaswamy by under 1 point? Well, in that scenario, I don't really think it's impossible that could happen. But I think Republicans are going to win Kansas and Ohio. But it is conceivable that could happen. Now, the next one is kind of a special case, because right now Republican Governor Phil Scott in the state of Vermont is going to win re-election by a safe margin if he runs. However, he has not officially said he is running again in 2026. Vermont elects its governors every 2 years, so he just ran for re-election just last year, so it's still very fresh from the last campaign. But if Phil Scott decided that he did not want to run, given Vermont is one of the most Democratic states at the presidential and Senate level in the state, Senator Bernie Sanders obviously comes from the state of Vermont, so it's a very blue state. If Scott were to announce that he's not running, Vermont's governor elections are always more competitive than their Senate and presidential elections, but we'd probably expect Vermont to start out as a safe automatic Democratic flip. And that would put Democrats up to 23, Republicans are at 13. Now, the only other governor's race in the entire country that I think could be competitive, aside from Texas, would be the state of New Hampshire, with Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte. Ayotte was the former senator from New Hampshire who lost a very close election to Maggie Hassan. And after that, she ran for governor in 2024 after Chris Sununu decided he was not running for re-election, and she defeated Democrat Joyce Craig by around 10%. I think Ayotte's going to win re-election in 2026. I don't really think there's really too much of an argument there, but could Democrats try and target this governor's race as a way to try and expand the map? Like Texas, I think they could. I think the Democrats could win, but I think it's more likely than not, given her approval ratings in the state of New Hampshire, that she would probably win re-election, similar to the Chris Sununu model where she won by a little bit more the first election after she got elected, not by like a drastic margin more, but probably by like another 1.5 to 2% margin of victory more, around an 11 to 12 point win. So sort of in a Democratic best case scenario, I have the Democrats getting up to 23 governor seats, Republicans at 13, with the Democrats held on to close races in Arizona, Kansas, Wisconsin, Michigan, and then made some flips in Nevada, in Georgia, in Iowa, in Ohio, and in Vermont. I kind of think 23 to 13 is what I think the Democrats' sort of best case scenario would be for 2026. It's an interesting conversation, though, because this isn't something that I think gets talked about a lot, the idea of Democrats kind of gaining seats on the 2026 governor's map. I know it's not a video I don't believe I've ever done before on the governor's map, so I wanted to go through it and kind of just see how the map would look. It certainly looks a little weird seeing some states like blue Kansas or blue Ohio, or even despite it being a blue state, seeing blue Vermont with Phil Scott being the governor is a little bit unusual too. But I don't know, I think it's an interesting scenario, an interesting topic. Leave your thoughts all down below. Now, obviously, again, this is not my official prediction for 2026, so don't take that as this is what I think is going to happen, because I don't. But I thought this was a fun video and a fun little exercise to do. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts, and I hope to see you in a future video.